I want to share a story that happened to me and my partner in September of 2023. We were hanging out with our two new friends, husband and wife. Their names were John and Mary. They decided to camp at Todd Lake Recreation Center, which is in the George Washington National Forest, and invited us to spend time at their campsite, have a few beers and relax by the campfire. My partner and I decided we weren't up for overnight camping, but we were down to hang out for a bit. The recreation center was only 45 minutes from home, so we thought we could drive if we didn't have but a few drinks, ate food and chilled for a few hours. So we get there around 4:30 p.m. and have camp snacks, sandwiches, chips, and some alcoholic seltzers. We wandered down to the lake and let their dog swim, and then we decided to head back to the campsite and start a fire. I knew we weren't staying the night, so I kept track on how many drinks I'd had and the food I ate to ensure I was suitable for the drive later. In total, I had 5 seltzers the entire night. Not to sound like an alcoholic or anything, but 5 seltzers do not explain what happened to us that night. I can handle my alcohol, and I'm responsible while drinking by pacing myself, eating food, and drinking water in between each beverage. So we were hanging by the fire with John and Mary, and the next thing you know, John says, "Hey, do you guys want to walk down to the lake?" "Yeah, sure, let's do it." The campsite has a short walking path to the lake, probably about half a mile away. It should only take minutes to get there. Now this is where it gets weird. I look at my cell phone and see it's 8:30 p.m. and decide to put my phone in the car before we walk down to the lake because I don't want to lose it. The next thing I know, I woke up in the woods, passed out on the ground on a trail with my partner in the middle of the George Washington National Forest, an hour away from their campsite, and John and Mary were nowhere to be found. My partner was on his back with his head turned to the side, and I was lying halfway on the moss, and the other half of him with my head turned to the side, almost as if we were placed perfectly. We were lost, and both felt extremely confused and sick. We both started throwing up, and had to take breaks walking out to try and find John and Mary's campsite. It took us an hour to get back, and it appeared we'd hiked an hour outside of the recreation center. We both had zero recollection of how we got there, why we were both passed out in the middle of the woods at night, and why the hell 5 seltzers with food over multiple hours made either of us be so sick and lose memory at the same time. My partner was completely disoriented and started screaming for help. I was begging for him to be quiet. I felt so sick I had no idea where we were. I needed a moment to collect myself and get my bearings to try and hike out of our current situation. Something to know about us is we are both avid hikers and backpackers and very comfortable outdoors in nature, even alone. However, at that moment, I was so thankful I didn't wake up in the woods at night on a trail alone. Thankfully, he was with me. The entire time, we both felt like we were being watched as we tried to find our way back. It was unsettling. I was telling my partner when we were trying to find our way back to the campsite that something felt very wrong, and when we got back, we needed to get to the car and leave. I felt it in my bones, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what happened. We were both utterly shocked that we somehow both conveniently blacked out simultaneously. I know what you're all thinking. We were drugged. We felt that too. But why would John and Mary, our supposed friends, drug us? And why would they drug us and carry us deep into a forest? It didn't add up. We finally made it back to the campsite, and I open my car and grab my phone to see what time it is. 2:30 a.m. My heart sank. How did this happen? How did it go from 8:30 p.m. when we were walking down to the lake, which was a half mile or less from their campsite, to 2:30 in the morning? Neither of us liked not knowing what happened to us in that lost time, so before we decided to leave, my partner knocked on their tent and said, "Hey, John, we're leaving." "What happened, man? We need to get out of here. Something's off." John then replies, "Where's Mary?" And my partner and I both look at each other, concerned, and say to John, "What do you mean? She's not in the tent with you? No, I thought she was with you guys. That's when we all decided to search for Mary. John said the last thing he remembered was that we were hanging out by the fire and asked if we wanted to go down to the lake. And then hours later, he woke up underneath the picnic tables at the campsite, not remembering how he got there. However, something seemed fishy, as he was too relaxed. We found Mary down the trail, slumped over and asleep in the woods near the campsite. Neither remembered what happened and why we ended up in these places. No one can remember what happened for those few hours. It was misty, dark and foggy on the mountain, and I was shivering, teeth chattering, feeling sick and just ready to go home. We got in the car and returned to our house, but it took a while to settle enough to sleep. When we spoke to John the next morning, they laughed it off. Maybe we shouldn't drink so much next time we hang out. I remember all of us hanging by the fire and then mentioning to us to go down to the lake, but I stayed back to deal with the dog and you three went down there. John changed his story from what he said the night before. Something didn't sit right with me. The Todd Lake Recreation Center was almost empty. We only saw one other family camping that night, and they weren't anywhere near our campsite, which was also odd. My partner and I didn't feel we drank enough to the point it would cause us to black out, especially at the same time. So what did happen? We were sore and a little cut up, but our only thoughts were that this must have been something paranormal, or did they drug us? I started to get flashbacks of memory, and all I could remember was John's face on the beach, then black. Did aliens abduct us? Was it something from Appalachian folklore like Mothman or some bizarre creature? Did we all drink too much? Did we get drugged? My partner lost his phone that night, so I called the ranger the following Monday and they said they found it in the woods busted up between campsites 5 and 6, but John and Mary were camping at campsite 1. The ranger mailed it to us because I didn't want to drive back there. I had a horrible pit in my stomach. The phone never cut back on, even though the front of the screen was perfectly intact. It was only the back of the phone that was busted. A part of me doesn't want to know what was on that iPhone. The next day, my partner was violently ill, and I was shivering with teeth chattering and chill bumps all day. We honestly probably should have gone to the hospital, and in my 30 years I've never experienced anything like this, and to this day we are skeptical about meeting new friends or having new people enter our lives. Either way, we're both so grateful we made it home safely that night and have each other. What do you think? My partner doesn't have social media, but I blocked John and Mary on mine, and we haven't seen them since. We moved to another state in 2024, but not because of this reason. But I dealt with a lot of PTSD and night terror since this occurred. I now worry if it was John or both of them. Are they doing this to other people? I was a guide during a Scouts winter camp. That night, snow had fallen, covering the camp in a fresh blanket, just after we had settled down for the night. Around 1 a.m. a student woke me up to go to the bathroom. It was my duty to stay awake until he resumed safely. He did his business and then came back to the tent. "There's someone out there," he whispered casually. "What?" I replied, still groggy. "I just saw some guy standing by the fire pit. He was wearing a red shirt." I got up and peered out of the tent window but saw nothing, thinking he might be confused or half asleep. I shrugged it off and we went back to sleep. About an hour later, I needed to relieve myself, so I stepped outside the tent. On my way back, I glanced towards the fire pit, and there he was, a man illuminated by the moonlight staring at me. I could even make out the plaid pattern on his red shirt. I quickly searched for my best flashlight and directed it at him, but before the light could touch him, he vanished. I immediately woke up another guide, and we searched the camp to ensure that no one was around. But there was no one. Even more unsettling, the snow around the camp remained untouched, and there wasn't a single footprint to be found. Me and my family had a pretty unsettling experience a number of years back. I wonder what you make of all of this. So let me set the scene. We were out catfishing in the dark. and lit a campfire. My brother, husband, and I were there. We usually leave around dusk, pick out our spots, gather firewood before dark. It's a breezy early summer evening, and the sky was cloudless and full of stars. It was a new moon, so still quite dark, and we're fishing, not catching more than a few perch, and it's getting close to 1 a.m., so we're starting to talk about packing up. But first, the guys head down the river a short way, about 50 yards or so, to check a few other spots. I stay by the fire and decide to lay down a bit to enjoy the quiet. A few minutes go by and I hear my brother call out, "Hey, are those flashlights?" I sit up from where he's pointing to a spot upstream and across the water past me. Now, flashlights would be kind of odd because the location and time of night, as anyone who would be out there would have already been there. There are these 3 little round lights. Now I know what you're thinking. They're probably just flashlights. Why am I even hearing this? You're all overreacting. But just wait. They're lights, certainly, but do not have the flashlight beams. They look very concentrated and circular, almost like a lantern light perhaps, and a dim one at that. But part of the riverbank is also a very steep muddy cliff just full of brush. So it's kind of weird that there would be someone there, when there are at least half a dozen easier ways to approach, not to mention it's particularly dangerous and not the best spot to be in anyway. And the lights aren't moving right. They're sort of erratic. The movements are smooth and don't bounce like someone walking down a cliff would be moving. And the movements are sort of in a figure 8 pattern, one breaking off and moving to the side before rejoining the others. So we were quite perplexed, watching it for a minute or so and commenting on how weird they're acting. But if it's another person, we need to know, because they aren't getting closer, and apparently flashlights just pointing at us is creepy behavior. So I move over to where they're sitting, and my husband and brother take off at a brisk pace towards where the lights are. I'm watching the weird things, and as the guys get closer, things really take a turn. One of them vanished completely and appeared 30 seconds later at the top of a pecan tree that had to be at least 15 feet tall. The other 2 split, one heading upstream where the guys were about to round a cluster of brush before they hit the water's edge and could see the other bank clearly, and the third one sort of hovering towards me but then back. The guys round the brush, and as soon as they do, the lights flash once and then all of them blink out suddenly. The guys are peering across with their own flashlights. I can faintly see the beams where I was, and see and hear absolutely nothing. We never heard anything at all. No brush crackling or twig snapping, no one climbing a tree, no water splashing, nothing. They all headed back, and we all unanimously decided that it was weird, and probably the best time to pack up and leave. Multiple visits to that spot afterwards, and it still produced some fish for us in the daylight, but once night would hit, we would never get a nibble. We all still talk about it sometimes. We've still never figured out what the hell those lights were. We've tried scaling that bank at a later date in the daytime, and it's just not possible at the exact location because of the steep cliff and dense brush. You can get from that side to the river, but you have to come out in a spot that's 30 yards upstream and further back. No explanation, and no, it wasn't fireflies, they didn't flicker, and were blue and white in color. If anyone can shed some information on what the hell we saw, I'd be most grateful. I was camping at various sites very close to the Appalachian Scenic Trail. One night, while sitting by my fire late, a guy suddenly appeared out of the shadows, startling me. He claimed to have lost his way while hiking and was relieved to finally be back on the correct trail. He asked if he could stay at my campsite until morning. I didn't mind, so offered him a beer, and we spent the rest of the evening talking. Nothing seemed unusual, and by the time I woke up the next day, he was gone. The following night, I set up camp 15 or 25 miles further along the trail. It was getting late, and I was preparing for bed when the same guy reappeared. I was surprised by his speed on foot, but assumed he'd hitched a ride or found a shortcut. After all, the previous night's camp was only about 20 miles away, a reasonable distance for someone moving quickly. We spent the evening much like the previous one, and he was gone by morning. The next day, a lingering sense of unease prompted me to investigate further. I relocated to a spot across the trail, parking as usual, and set off on a hike, but instead of following the trail, I concealed myself among a rocky outcrop overlooking my car and the path. As dusk approached, the puzzle pieces fell into place. Headlights illuminated the scene. He had a vehicle and had been tailing me, using my parked car as a beacon to find my campsites. I bided my time until he was well down the trail, searching for my non-existent camp before springing into action. I swiftly packed up, retraced my steps past the initial campsite I mentioned, and drove a further 18 miles along the trail. That night I stayed up late with my bourbon. His third appearance confirmed my suspicions. I remained hospitable but was on high alert. It was possible we were both just traveling in the same direction, with me camping while he was covering ground on the trail. But finding me after I'd backtracked almost 45 miles, that was too deliberate to be a coincidence. As expected, later that night, I woke up in my hammock to feel this guy kissing my arms and neck. Instinctively, I reacted, hitting him hard in the ribs and springing to my feet. I grabbed my knife and made some serious threats, really serious threats. I wrestled him into a chokehold and squeezed him until he passed out. I tied him to a tree and smashed his windshield completely, then got the hell out of there, driving straight to my hometown to lay low for a few days. I've never thought much of ghost stories, just never got the appeal. Some overblown and probably fake stories told in a spooky voice. And for what? To make you feel creeped out? That tingle down your spine? Not really my scene, but somehow, whenever we were all camping out or hiking, it always ends up happening. Once the tents are pitched and we're all fed, warming ourselves around the fire, as the cold of the night seals in, someone always decides to pipe up. Did you ever hear the one about? Each to their own, I guess. We've been hiking and camping for 2 nights now, our group of 5, and we're almost back at the cars, weary and in desperate need of a good shower. But all of us are happy. Back into reality for the rest of them, our brief respite now over. But I got another couple of days spare, so once I've seen them off, I'm going to head out for a bit more. Some solo adventuring, which is the purest form of the experience. We lash the gear on, double and triple check that I have everything I'm going to need, and then I watch them drive away, and the sound slowly dies. There's nothing at all around apart from the pure silence that envelops me, and with a smile I hitch my pack up higher onto my back and start to head up the trail towards my planned route. The Green Mountains in Vermont are impressive in a lot of ways. There's something about the expanse of woods and endless climbs across the well-worn trails that speak to a lot of people, me included. Sometimes you can find yourself with nothing around for miles, not a single sound, but the crunch of gravel under your boots. A solitude that makes you think of the people that have walked this way before, that have made these climbs, have pitched their tents, and lit their fires in the same way I do. The afternoon was dragging, and the miles were falling behind me. There's a coolness starting to gather, but it's not quite the darkness that is letting me know night is there. The map I'm using tells me I've not got long to go, and for the next hour or so, I know it's just going to be me and my thoughts. Step after step, mile after mile, like a well-oiled machine, on and up. Nothing in my head but the thought of that campsite, the taste of that dinner, and the feel of the fire on my face before I slip under the canopy and maybe listen to the pitter-patter of raindrops tapping away. But every time I think that the clearing is just around the next bend, it opens up to more trails and endless trees, not thinning out, feeling as though they're closing in, getting denser, reaching across to each other over the top of my head to try and block the fading sunlight. It's not unusual for an older map like the one I'm using to be a little inaccurate, but with every passing minute, it's starting to be a bit more of a worry. The darkness is on its way, and I need to either get to where I'm heading or find somewhere suitable to pitch my tent. But on either side, the silent tree trunks are getting even closer to the narrow trail, leaning in, claustrophobic and stifling. There isn't a feeling of panic yet, more of an unease. A couple of glances over my shoulder once in a while, as if I half heard a sound behind me. Long looks to either side, things to pick out any sign of movement through the tree line. All that's going through my head now are the stories that my friends were telling me last night. The ghost stories, the ones that sound so ridiculous and far-fetched when you're in good company with a fire blazing bright. But they also creep into your subconscious when you find yourself all alone on the trail. And I know all the spookiest stories start with the claim that this really happened, but most of what they told was apparently true. A bunch of tales all collected together and bundled under the imaginative title of the Bennington Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle, but focused on this endless expanse of woodland. I scoffed at the idea last night, but can't muster a laugh now. One story was of a hunter who went out deep into the woods and beyond in the 1940s, never to be seen again. Nobody found, no known cause of death, just vanished into thin air. All my suggestions of falling down ravines or becoming injured deep in the backwoods seems sensible at the time, but the nothingness all around me feels like it's hinting at something else that could have been the cause. My pack is feeling heavy, and my feet are sore. There's another turn up ahead, and I'm starting to pray that it will be the last one. I remember the next story. A young woman, only a college sophomore, went out hiking there and never returned. Same as the hunter. No signs of a struggle, no hints of anything wrong. In fact, she was pretty lightly dressed, not even intending to go that far. And again, nothing found. The sound of gravel under my boots is coming more frequently, and I realize I must be walking faster. As I reach the corner, I can feel my heart sink, as all it reveals is another short straight with a blind bend again, as if every section of this walk is just a copy of the last, but darker, more foreboding, and with less room to maneuver. The trail is still there. I'm making my way onwards, resembling the third story they told me, the one that they said was about campers just like us, and the one that happened closest to where we were. It goes like this. Two relatives out for a couple of days of wild camping, ones that were familiar with the area. Another glance behind, a lingering stare into the darkness between the tree trunks where I could have sworn I heard a twig snap. The story goes that they went off to explore a trail that didn't seem to be marked on any of the new maps, one that only existed in some of the original copies, one that makes me think of this trail I've decided to explore for some reason. I pull my pack higher on my back and break into a light jog, trying to convince myself that my heart rate is going up from the exertion. They were never found. Not their tent, not their clothes, not their kit. No note left, no scene of disturbance, just nothing. The darkness is arriving without me even realizing, and it takes the branches whipping me in the face to make me even register that I'm running. There's no light at all coming from the thick canopy above. The trees have fully closed overhead. They're pulling in from both sides and swallowing up the trail I'm on, making it narrower still, as though it was just going to come to a point once they get round the bend. All the stories, the ones that sounded ridiculous, feel very real. People don't just disappear. So what if there's something out here? I'm panting now, sweat dripping on my forehead already. I could swear there are more sounds behind than just my feet kicking up stones, but I refuse to look back. The branches keep touching me, slapping my face and clawing at my clothes, but I break free every time. As I reach the bend, my toe catches a stone and I sprawl headlong around it, lying in the dust. Up ahead, finally, mercifully, is the clearing. An old wooden bench, some signs of recent life. Overhead, the final vestiges of sunlight are streaming down, pointing out my place of safety. I look back down the trail and it looks less claustrophobic. It almost looks like the trees have pulled back and opened a little. In fact, it doesn't look in the slightest bit scary anymore. And suddenly I realize I can hear birds, I can sense nature around me again. I'm still not one for ghost stories, or so I tell myself as I dust myself off and get ready to pitch my tent. But I'm still going to keep my fire burning all night. Not for any particular reason though. Honest. I was a fresh 21-year-old and had recently rediscovered a love of dance and started enjoying concerts and festivals. I had attended my first festival at 20 and had the most amazing time volunteering and meeting people. It was a last-minute and unexpected situation that first year, but after the amazing experience I had, I was hooked. It's prudent to add that I was extremely naive and obviously new to that kind of scene. So the next year, I had cut off the friends I had gone to festivals with before, but still had friends of friends that went that I got along with really well and had good memories with. So even though I was going to my second year at the same festival, I was going effectively solo and just camping with friends of friends, which I suppose was the beginning of the problem. I got going kind of late, so when I got to the festival, the lines to get in were extremely long. I'd packed diligently, but the service wasn't great, and I was having a hard time contacting the semi-friends I was camping with. By the time I found them and had set up, it was dark. It was a newer but pretty large festival, and I have a really bad sense of direction. In future years, I'd learned to bring solar batteries and solar lights and obnoxious decorations because of the night. It was also in a different location that year, so I was unfamiliar with where I'd camped with my surroundings. My ex-roommate Tom and his girlfriend Gina were the ones I was closest to, and Tom was bringing some special acid for me, as a kind of apology for not sticking up to me in a roommate situation. We all went to the first show together, but all got really high very fast. I took too much and knew it pretty quickly, so I knew the night was gonna go sideways, but by the time I realized, Tom and Gina had wandered off, leaving me completely alone. I tried to find my way back to my tent, thinking I'd lie down for a bit and be okay, but couldn't remember how to get to it or where it was. It was dark, I was starting to panic, and being high as hell, and didn't know where anyone or anything was, or how to find my campsite. I was freaking out. I was in a crop top and jean shorts in high desert at nighttime, and it was getting cold. I wandered over to the disco area because it was the first thing I found. I wandered around to see this woman in the most unusual clothing, think almost pioneer, so I went to speak with her. I genuinely don't know to this day if the person was real or not. We ended up wandering around, not sure if they were real or a hallucination, and I was trying to find my campsite when we reached the RV/car ramp area. This man in his early 30s with glow sticks asks if he want any, and we say yeah. She goes first, and as soon as it's on her wrist, she goes skipping away. I call out to her to wait, but she doesn't stop. The man looks at me and asks if I'm alright, and if I can find my friend. I stupidly say, "Oh, I don't really know her. I can't find my campsite and she was helping, but oh well." He responds with, "You look a lot like my little sister. I wouldn't want her running around lost like this. Look, my buddy and I are gonna go watch XYZ shows, and I wouldn't feel right leaving you, so you can stay in his RV for a few hours to sleep it off." Obviously, I was too high, too young and naive to see where this would go, and I stupidly complied and followed him. It was fine at first. It was a toy hauler, I think that's what it's called, so the back end was like a U-Haul that stayed open. The first guy put on an album I previously loved as a teenager, but now can still barely listen to it, tucked me in and left me. I didn't see his buddy at that point. Fast forward a few hours, I'd been tripping out to this music and actually been getting good to the point where they got back. For the record, I didn't request this particular band, it was just on loop. The first thing was the guy that told me I looked like his sister climbing on top of me while I was half conscious, kissing my neck and touching me. Then I felt the second one and his hands. I was still high and out of it, but immediately told them to stop and that I wasn't in a place for that. They got angry, and the one who'd gotten me there was the one who was most frightening. I saw his eyes change in that moment, and knew I was screwed if I couldn't get away. No matter how high I was, I needed to leave. I don't even recall formulating a plan. I remember the main man saying, "We helped you, now you owe us," and slamming my knee into his groin. I may have forgotten that he was on top of me at some point. All I remember is running for my life into the very prickly bushes, not knowing where I was going, but desperately running away. The second man seemed a bit nervous about the whole thing and didn't do much except for touch me while the other one held me down with the weight of his body. I met a couple of kind souls that calmed me down when I was completely freaking out, crying and covering in dirt and thorns, and they gave me a safer space. I didn't sleep that night, as I could no longer trust any kind stranger, but also couldn't find my camp. It was 10 yards away, as I discovered the next day. This is a story about my worst hitchhiking experience. The incident was sketchy as hell, but I still wouldn't give up my love for hitchhiking. I am 20 years old and from Finland. This happened on the 2nd of December last year in Kalamata, Greece. I had been hitchhiking for quite a while at this point. I had started from Budapest and hitchhiked through 7 different countries with only positive outcomes. The story begins at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Some hours before I had woken in my hammock hung up behind the castle ruins, in the only place that had trees that weren't olive trees that belonged to someone. I was tired from the lack of sleep caused by the cold night and woke up early to the noise of the busy market across the street. After a quick tour of the town and some breakfast, it was time for hitchhiking. I made a sign with the words Athens and Sparta in Greek, and I was standing by the side of the road, one leading to a roundabout where the first exit goes towards Areopoli, the second towards Sparta, and the third towards Athens. A lot of cars drove by, but nearly all of them took the first exit. It took at least an hour for the first car to stop. It was this small, quite old, worn-out white car, and driving it was an older guy of around 60, who looked a little dirty. Greasy hair, some teeth missing, and a big nose filled with visible blackheads. He didn't really speak English, but I could understand that he was going to Sparta, and I was a bit frustrated by the fact that pretty much all the cars were going towards Areopoli, so I thought this might be my only chance and jumped in. We are trying to have a conversation, but without a shared language it isn't really possible. We introduce ourselves and I try to explain where I'm from. He smokes and offers me a cigarette, but I politely decline, and we drive just shy of 6 kilometers before the guy suddenly makes a left turn and we end up in his yard. He stops the car, gets up and signals for me to follow, so I do. I take my bags and feel a bit confused. It's a small house on the mountain surrounded by sheep and olive trees. There's a dog sleeping in the sun, but it doesn't seem to be bothered by us at all. We walk to this balcony/terrace that surrounds his house. I put my bags inside of his house and join him sitting on the balcony. He lights up another cigarette and asks if I want to eat something or maybe take a shower. I refuse, and with the help of Google Translate, I ask why we aren't going to Sparta. He answers that I could sleep at his house and he'll drive me there tomorrow. I try to explain that I would like to get to Sparta or even to Athens today, so staying at his place isn't really an option. I'm pointing out that there aren't many cars going past his house, like maybe one every 15 minutes, and only 4 to 5 hours of daylight left, so every minute is valuable to me. He doesn't really seem to understand me, so I get up and walk through the door to grab my bags. I put my backpack on, pick up my other bag, and turn over to see him inside. I try to walk out, but he stops me and guides me to the side, locks the door and turns to me. At this moment I'm not panicking or anything, because I assume this is a form of hospitality, and he's just doing this jokingly to offer me some food. I kept saying no to him, but he doesn't care. Now he's standing right in front of me, and I'm starting to feel very disturbed by his presence. For some reason I keep staring at his blackhead-filled nose. The image still haunts me. He opens his mouth and raises his right hand in a loose fist in order to show me a hand job motion. I'm still saying no to him, and he suddenly grabs me by the crotch, and I feel this cold, tingling sensation shiver through my body as my hairs stand on end. I keep saying no, and I start to raise my fist in order to hit him. We stand like this for a few seconds, and thank God he lets go. I'm still feeling the urge to hit him, but I don't. He asks if we're going to get intimate, and I almost shout no at him at the tone that makes it sound like I'm questioning the question itself. He opens the door and lets me leave. I walk out feeling so creeped out by the experience. I walk past the dog to the road and see 2 pickup trucks on either side of the road. The trucks are surrounded by a group of hunters carrying shotguns on their shoulders. This instantly makes me feel a lot safer. I keep walking by the road for a while before a car passes me. It's quite worn, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I empty one of my water bottles and turn it upside down, showing it to the cars passing by so they would think I'm out of water. This works and the second car stops. I got to Sparta and later that day to Athens safely, but I felt disgusting until I got to take a shower. All the kindness I had experienced while hitchhiking before this event had made me too comfortable, and I had let my guard down. I think humans are good by nature, but probably trusting every stranger is a stretch. Stranger danger is still overrated though. I was 9 years old when this happened. My sister, my dad, my stepmom and I were at a place called Palmetto Island. It was a camping resort where you just pull up with a tent or camper and stay there for a weekend or so. We were in a camper. Before I get to the actual story, I should set the scene. I am a male, and Palmetto Island wasn't really an island in the traditional sense. It was completely surrounded by palm trees and vegetation except for the road in and out. There were roads in the resort, but they were only for golf carts and other smaller vehicles. The whole place was also so dense with palm trees and vegetation, if you weren't on the road, in a campsite, or at one of the recreation areas, you would be in a forest. So we, my family, were all hanging at one of the playgrounds. I had made a new friend who I was playing with, and at some point the rest of my family had left me to play with my new friend, until eventually he left too. I was there alone and the sun was beginning to set. This wasn't the first time we'd been to Palmetto Island, and I had, at the time, known it pretty well. I had assumed that the walk back to our campground would be short. However, at some point I got turned around and ended up at the area where we would launch boats into the water to go fishing. There was a group of people there, and I asked them for directions. Now, I wasn't completely brain dead, so I lied and said that the number of our campsite was 10 sites down from our actual one, and they pointed me in the right direction and I began walking. Now, I hadn't known this at the time, but my family had realized I was no longer at the playground and started driving around in our golf cart and another one they had rented. If they hadn't, I probably wouldn't be telling this story. As I'm walking towards our campsite, a car pulls up beside me, and it's one of the people I had asked for directions. They roll down the window. Keep in mind I had been walking for about an hour or two in total, and he offers me a ride and tells me to ride in the front seat. I'm tired and weary from walking, so I accept and get into this stranger's car. I know, it's something you should never do. And we're driving in the right direction. That is, of course, until he passes up the entrance to the campsites, at which point I knew something was wrong. I tell him he passed it and he doesn't reply. By some stroke of divine luck, I see my dad in a golf cart driving in the opposite direction at us, and I start yelling and waving at him. He pulls up in front of the car and stops, and so does the guy driving. I use the manual unlock in the car door and run to my dad, who has his concealed carry drawn on the guy as soon as I'm out of the way. He calls the police and holds the guy at gunpoint until they get there and arrest him. I'm only now telling this story because I found out last week the guy and his whole family had done this before and gotten away with it too. I try not to think about what would have happened to me had my dad not showed up when he did. Years ago, we camped at a campsite in Kauai, Botswana. It is extremely remote, and there are no fences around the campsite, so the wild animals often came into it. Kauai is well known for the elephants, and they often came into the campsite. Now some context is needed. People are always warned to never, ever bring any citrus into the camp, since the elephants will smell it, and they absolutely wreck everything in order to get it. One of the groups, however, ignored the warning and brought some oranges or something with them. Granted, they apparently sealed it in an airtight fridge within their car, but that didn't matter much. This group was a husband and wife, and they were camping in a rooftop tent. One night, the husband woke up and looked out of their tent, and was quite surprised when he came face to face with a massive elephant inspecting their tent and car. They both jumped out of the tent and car right before the elephant proceeded to rip the tent off the roof with its tusks and ripped the jerry cans off the car. Remember, these things aren't taped on or anything, they're bolted onto the cars, and after the elephant starts destroying their stuff, all hell breaks loose. All of the other campers getting to their cars and start making a ruckus with their hooters and engines. The camp starts to set off air cannons to try and chase it away, and all the women and children collecting to groups and start running to the bathrooms that's surrounded with a massive wall made to withstand elephants. It was pure chaos. By the end, the elephant was chased off, and the campers in question left that next day. On another note, people are always warned to never try to walk to camp if their car gets stuck. They are to stay in their car and wait for patrol or other campers to find them, since there are animals such as lions, hyenas and leopards and other predators in the area. One pair of campers apparently did not follow this golden rule and decided to walk to camp. Their car was found, they were not. In remote camps like this, you do not mess around. My girlfriend and I decided to go camping for our anniversary this summer. We didn't have the money to book through a nicer campsite like a KOA or something, so we found a website where you can book campsites that people have created on their private land at much cheaper prices. We found a good one in Pine, Colorado, checked the reviews, and all of them had only good things to say, so we decided that was the right choice. A few days before we left, I got a text from the campground host just giving me directions because apparently I would lose service pretty quickly as we got closer. On the drive up, I called the host to see if there was a check-in desk or if we just found our designated spot on our own. She told us once you get there that you just follow the directions right to your spot, and everything felt very normal. Once we got to the campground, there was a big swinging gate, like the type you see for an entrance to a farm with flags decorating it. We entered the code she'd given us and found our campsite, which is all the way up a really windy hill at the very top. We saw the porta potties, and if I remember correctly, 3 other families with children and 1 older man in an Airstream on our way up the hill. Our site was at the very top, with all the other camps lower than ours going down the hill. We had a beautiful view of the dense forest all around us. It had been raining on and off all day, so we decided to set up our tent immediately, just in case it started to rain again. We cooked dinner, read, took a little nature walk, and then decided to sit by the fire and chat for a while. Around 11 p.m, we're both starting to get tired, and we hear what sounded like a jet engine starting up about 200 feet away from the forest. For whatever reason, neither me or my girlfriend acknowledged it, and didn't think much of it and went to bed. In the morning we made breakfast and talked about what we wanted to do today. We talked about going on a hike or a scenic drive of some kind. We got ready for the day when all of a sudden it started to rain again, but really hard. Everything got drenched and covered in dirt and mud, and we heard the same noise we heard the night before. and this time we both turned to each other and said, "What the hell was that?" I've had an anxiety disorder for most of my adolescence, but in recent years, I've been able to get it under much better control and haven't had a panic attack in a while. For whatever reason, I had a terrible one right then and convinced myself that we needed to drive into town so that I could get service to check the weather, to see if it was going to stay like this, to determine whether we should pack up or not before it gets worse. So my girlfriend complies in order to help me calm down so that I can stop freaking out. Okay, so the town is 45 minutes to an hour away, a windy rural road with few properties and 2 huge churches, both painted in unconventional colors. It was maybe a 5-minute drive between the two, not sure if that has anything to do with what we experienced, but both me and my girlfriend thought it was creepy. So we checked the weather. It says it'll be fine for the rest of the day, we get some slushy and some cooking oil for dinner, and drive the 45 minutes back to the campsite. As soon as we got back, we noticed that all of the other campers were gone, and I mean gone like no tents on trailers, no trash like they had all packed up and left. I also noticed that I never saw a host cabin with ice and firewood like it had said on the website. We were weirded out but figured it was just because of the rain. I'm finally relaxed and started to cook dinner, and while I'm cooking we hear the noise again. And a little louder this time. We both look at each other with open mouths, baffled but also not taking it too seriously. About half hour later, my girlfriend says she's starting not to feel well. This is not an abnormal thing. My girlfriend has a pain disorder and at night it can get bad. So I help her take her meds and tell her that I'm just going to clean up outside and I'll come in and we can go to sleep. At that moment, while I'm packing things in the car, my vision gets really weird. Everything is moving ever so slightly and has a pink and green fluorescent hue to it. I brush it off thinking I'm probably tired. I got in the tent, and my girlfriend looked very scared and frozen all of a sudden, the same way I felt. She asked if we could go home right now, to which of course I said yes. She said she had the same vision experience I had 5 minutes ago, and we both felt that something was watching us. The sun was about half hour from setting, and we started taking everything down immediately. As we were doing all of this, that feeling got worse, both progressively and more freaked out. We shoved everything into the car and got back into the city around midnight. Does anyone have any possible idea on what could have happened? I've not really been able to rationalize it to myself, but any suggestions would be appreciated to get to the end of this mystery. I wanted to camp for a night or so I snuck out to a state park without a reservation. Some of them allow primitive camping, where you can just set up in the woods without an official campsite, so I snuck in after dark on foot. At some point I took a wrong turn and tried to find a spot off a main trail, when someone deep in the woods said, "You better turn around and walk out of here." I left the area assuming it was just some campers whose site I almost walked into. I kept my light off to not be easily discoverable. So I left, walked clear across the trail and in the other direction, hiding periodically to see if I was being followed, and apparently I was. What became apparent later was that these folks didn't think I would go further into the park, so I heard them in ATVs. Originally, I thought they were just joyriding, but I was wrong. So I found a suitable spot, set up, stayed quiet for a while and heard nothing. Then I did a stupid thing. I lit a cigarette. The moment I did, I heard an inhale. I hid well enough, but exposed my position by accident. I laid there for a while hoping nothing would happen, but these people did not leave and were not threatened by me verbally telling them to get away from me. They started making weird animal noises, then started talking about my belongings, identifying themselves as a gang and their final sin, hoping my phone worked. After the phone comment, I gave up all hope these people were up to nothing malicious. So I thought, you're right, I do, and I'm using it just because this just got out of hand. I was on the phone with 911 for a while before they hung up. Apparently they couldn't contact the park rangers, but were working on it. Definitely not what I wanted to hear. These people became emboldened by the fact nothing seemed to be happening, and I heard their voices coming closer. So I called again, planning to scare them off by grandstanding, but this call it was revealed to me the state troopers were responding and not the rangers. And the best news? They were at the gate. When I announced that state troopers were coming, they left immediately, probably because they could see their flashlights on the trail. The big reveal? I heard ATVs racing off through the hills. These people waited for me to settle and searched through the park for me after scouring the back roads. The only reason I think they might not have been sinister is they didn't actually attack or rob me during the 15 to 20 minute lag time between calling the authorities and them actually arriving. When I was in primary school, we used to go on school trips to a place called Merchants Hill in Surrey, UK. Merchants Hill is an adventure centre that mainly caters to schools. They have activities like climbing, orienteering, canoeing, and they had dorms we stay in, as we usually went for 4 to 5 days. The place sits on 45 acres of land, and there's no reason to be there other than the above. I believe they also have a part for adults for team building trips and stuff like that, but they're not together, so we'd only ever see employees or sometimes kids from different schools while we were there. One evening we were camping out for the night. A Merchants Hill employee led us to the camping area at 7 p.m, helped show us how to set up the tents and start a fire, then left for the night, leaving us in the care of 2 of our teachers from school. We had a fire going and were all sitting around it on logs that were placed around the fire area. We were singing songs and talking and just being kids as it got darker. After a while, a couple of us heard the sound of someone approaching, but I thought nothing of it, probably an employee just checking in. When suddenly this guy appears out of the darkness and loudly says, "You shouldn't be here." Everyone whips their head around to see who it was, and this guy's just standing there. He's a big guy and looked homeless. He had this big, scraggly beard and was wearing a suit with Wellington boots, holding a plastic bag. One of our teachers says to the guy, "It's okay, we booked him for a few days, we're from the school." The guy looks around a few seconds like he's checking behind himself and then repeats, "You shouldn't be here," but louder. The male teacher that was with us jumped up and positioned himself between the guy and us kids very quickly and repeats that we are supposed to be here and asks the man who he is, while at the same time grabbing him by the arm to sort of lead him away. The strange guy pulls his arm away aggressively and then walks off really quickly without another word. A bit later, all the kids are in their tents, 2 to a tent. The teachers are still sitting outside, probably enjoying some child-free time when we hear someone shouting, and it sounded to me like, "Go, go, get out." A few of us opened our tents, and I could just about see the same guy standing there in the darkness. A teacher is already right by the guy at that point and shouts at him to leave, but the guy is just looking at him, so the teacher starts to gently push him back away from us and is saying something to the guy while doing so. They disappear into the darkness of the surrounding area, and for maybe 30 seconds my teacher comes back with a look of urgency and says, "We're going back to the dorms now." No idea what was said, but my whole teacher's demeanor changed. We all leave our tents pitched and walk the 10 minutes or so back to the dorms by torchlight. Once we're in the dorms, the teacher goes off to speak with an employee, and about 15 minutes later we see a police car pull up by the reception area and the police are talking to my teacher. The guy had absolutely no reason to be on that 45 acres of land. Looking back, he probably had mental health issues, but he scared the crap out of us, and thinking of it still makes me feel a bit uneasy to this day.